So much for joining us this morning. Thank you for being here. It's just so good to see all of you. It's been a packed week for some of us. We were down in Dallas for a conference, which was, by the way, so good. It was so good to just, sometimes you don't, let me say it this way, sometimes you don't know how weary you are till you stop. And just being in a atmosphere where you could just take in and receive, and it was so good. It was just fantastic. But it's great to be back. So good to be with you guys. I'm going to talk this morning about this topic, and I'm going to tiptoe into this because I wish I knew a lot more about it. But I want to just push into it and say, how do we think about this? And again, even as we do that, there's so much of this has been formed by the longings in my own heart, the dissatisfaction with how I live my life for Jesus and all of that. And so, and then listening to other people and hearing from other people and reading about it for years. So a lot of these thoughts aren't original with me, and some I'm sure are. It's been my journey. So I'm going to just push into that. So let's read these verses, a few verses together, and then we'll start. Seek first the kingdom. Never forget that. That's what shapes our so much of how we are. That should shape our schedule. That shapes everything. Seek first the kingdom. And then this. It is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Always remember this. The process of transformation is always a movement away from bondage toward freedom. For the Lord is the Spirit, and wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Freedom is not the absence of something, it's the presence of someone. Never forget that. Don't try to get rid of stuff, try to get close to someone. And the Lord, who is the Spirit, makes us more and more like Him as we are changed into His glorious image. Let's pray. God, I thank you this morning. I thank you for the possibility of being like you here in our broken world, here in the stress of life, here in this place, this space where we live, to be like you. So teach us from your heart this morning. Give us not information only, but revelation. May your Spirit just really direct these next moments. In Jesus' name, amen. So in this whole thing of pursuing freedom, and if you've grown up, and kind of the interesting part of this is, if you've grown up in the church, you grew up with this idea of what it means to be like Jesus, whatever that was. And we speak of it, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, but we speak of it primarily on a couple levels, and I want to kind of expand on that. But the problem is, we come from this one kingdom, and we're transferred, as Paul says, into this other kingdom. And the reality of this other kingdom, when that becomes definitional of our lives, or when that becomes the center point of our life, what we find out real quickly, all of us has found out, we still kind of cater toward the stuff here. This is learned behavior we've done for years. And to kind of come over here and think about, how is it that what does it actually mean? And there's been times in my life, I've said to myself, I stink at being like Jesus. Have you ever thought that? Like, I am so not good at this. So I'm going to talk about this idea of change and how it should sit in our hearts. But I want to begin with two stories that kind of set our minds in a certain way. Here's what I want to protect us from. This story comes from my life. I was... way back in the day, I used to drive a LeBaron. Did anybody drive a LeBaron? Oh, you... It's complicated. Here's the problem with driving a LeBaron. If you struggle with self-image and self-doubt, drive up in a LeBaron and see what happens to you. I mean, you hit all-time lows. But anyhow, on a given day, right across the road here, I had a flat tire. And so as luck would have it, in my trunk, I had a tire wrench. Now, that was the good news. The bad news was this. It wasn't for that vehicle. Not a problem. I'm in my early 30s, and I'll figure this out. So I get the tire wrench, which is for another vehicle, which, by the way, fit another set of lug nuts. And I shoved them on, and it's not quite tight, but I bet I can do this. You guys know where this is going, right? So I pop the first one, and I get the second one, and I get one that's tough, and I'm thinking, if I put my brawn into, I can get this, and I gave it the business. And I stripped the lug nut. See, now I have a different problem. Now, my problem is not a flat tire. My problem is a strip lug nut. Here's why I say that. Some of us have been trying so hard to be like Jesus. And I promise you this, I know this much about this process. Satan will do everything he can to get you to try hard to be like Jesus with the wrong tool. And the problem you'll create for yourself will be a lot worse than the problem of not being like Jesus. Does that make sense? He wants you to try hard with the wrong tool. And it's going to look close, but not quite. So as we think about this process of transformation, don't think try harder. We need to set our minds differently in this whole way of thinking about it. The other thing, I would say this, and if I was to say a parable, because Jesus he talked about the kingdom in parables or stories. He had his own stories. All right, this is amateur hour of the parable talk. But the kingdom of heaven is like potty training. I hope you don't leave and tell somebody that I said that. Here's how it is. I remember the days, and now I get to watch it in my grandkids. The whole process of the whole pamper diaper experience, you put on a clean one, and then that thing gets transferred into something that's not clean, and then you put on a clean one, it gets transferred back and forth. And then one day you have this miracle happen of potty training. And that transformation, that change is not going from clean to dirty, clean to dirty, clean to dirty. That change has the potential, once it's actually learned by the child, of eliminating the process under it. So when you think about changing into the likeness of Jesus, first of all, he didn't come here. The whole idea of transformation is not for him to make you clean and then you make yourself dirty and then he cleans you up and then you make yourself dirty and he cleans you up and you go through life just hoping that you don't make as many messes of your journey as. That's not the point. The point is to change the level of there's a change that happens inside you, and once that child learns that level, it eliminates this. This is gone. So the process of transformation, it's moving from level to level, not in a linear kind of way, but in a progression that once you get to this level, there's much about what happened below you that is no longer an issue in your heart anymore. Does that make sense? That's the process that we want to think about. So one, don't think trying harder. Especially if you got the wrong tool, man, just back off. That's not going to, the damage you'll do will be a lot worse than the damage you're trying. And the other piece of it is he's not just here to clean up your messes. He's here to do something that raises you up so that the level below you is now you have power over. He gives you the power to live in victory over the level below you. So let's jump into levels of change that processes of change. I'm thinking a lot about this because I don't know why this was really, probably because I've been healing journey and Andy's trying to make sense out of my mess. I don't know how well he's doing. It's probably confusing and it's sure not his fault, but I think about this. Here's here's what I say about this. In our journey, as we become persons who follow Jesus, we may hit this dissatisfaction in our life where I got to change something around me. Have you ever been there? Like, I got to change something about my environment. So we look around you, and we're trying to be, maybe we have some awful friends. Maybe we've hitched our wagon to some awful friends, and we say, man, if I'm going to be like Jesus, I need to change something about our environment. So we move over and we start to change. And maybe that means we change the friends we have. Maybe that means we change the job. Maybe that there could be a lot of levels of change on the environment level. And I want to say a couple of things about this level here. This is really important level, but no, this is the lowest level of change you'll ever make, because it's changing something out there. It's the easiest thing to ever change. I change where I go to church. I maybe trade in my family for a better group of, no. You know what I mean. Changing something outside of us. And sometimes in that process, maybe I move. Like once upon a time, I was living in Florida, and I'm like, if I'm going to get anywhere, I got to get out of this joint. You know what I found when I got here? Guess who followed me? Me. See, that's the problem with this level. It can be so important that we look and we evaluate what's going on and say, maybe I didn't make a shift and a change, but know this. It's the lowest possible level ever of changing. So then we go to this one. And here's kind of the center, at least depending your background, of all Christianity. Behavior. Man, this would trip us up. This comes to us when we realize that there's pieces in our life where we need to start something new. We need to engage something. That's what we're thinking anyhow. Really watch this one, because this one is again way important. It's only the second level. But this is what we really focus on. Like, you're not acting like him. Your behavior is not lining up with who you are as a new creature in Jesus. So anyhow, we start with, well, maybe I need to start this and I need to do this, and maybe if I get myself in a class and I do this and this and this, and then I also, as a piece of that, if I stop doing this and I stop doing that and I stop doing this, then I'm going to become like Jesus. Here's the problem with some of this. Let me set this problem up with telling you a story, a behavior story. There was a lady that I knew about who before I tell you this story, here's a problem with behavior. Connect it with your behavior, your thoughts, and your feelings. Okay, so let me just frame it this way. If I go out today and I do something stupid, by the way, if you've done something stupid in your life, can you just raise your hand? We've been there, haven't we? So I go out and I do something that's really stupid. Then I start to do what next? See, connected with behavior is feelings and thoughts. So then I start to feel stupid, right? As the other piece of that, I start to think, stupid. Have you ever done that? You let yourself go down that rabbit trail? What are the chances if you did something stupid on the behavior level and then your feelings connect with that and you realize on a feeling level, that was really stupid, I feel stupid now. And then on a thought level, you start saying stupid. What's the chance that you'll go out and make a good decision? You see the problem? So this lady went to a person that I know to get some help, and she said, my son needs help. My son's a wreck. And he's like, okay, but before I talk to your son, I want to talk to you. Tell me about you. So here was her story. She would go to bed and then wake up about 7, 8 o'clock. And as she laid in bed, before she ever got up, she would think these thoughts in her head. I'm a complete failure. I'm really worthless. I'm really not. I'm a failure. She would roll over in bed and go back to sleep. She'd wake up around 1 o'clock. By that time, her kids had gone to school. Her husband had gotten the kids ready, got them off to school, and she's laying there, and he's off at work. And as she's laying there processing that she missed that whole process because she never got out of bed, then the thoughts were, I really am worthless and a failure. She'd take a sleeping pill, go back to sleep. She'd usually wake up between 8 and 9 o'clock. By that time, the kids were at home, had dinner, and some of them would be in bed already, and her husband was trying to corral everything, get ready for the next day, and all of that. And she'd stumble out, and pretty quickly, the kids were all in bed, and her husband would go to bed, and then she would sit up and watch bad TV till about 2 or 3 in the morning, and then go back to bed. When she talked to my friend, that had been going on for 11 consecutive years. And she said this, there is no hope for me. Do you think there's any chance you could help my son? I'm going to finish up that story in a few moments. But here's what I'd say to you about the behavior level. We get so fixated on this behavior thing. And behavior matters, by the way. It does. But see where it is on the list? And it's not even how much it matters, it's how we focus on it. And what is the tool that I use to engage the thing of behavior? That's the big question. And am I really working hard to, man, I got to quit thinking these terrible thoughts, and I'm just kind of I could be a person who can be sarcastic, and I could be a person who can be rude, and I have all of this stuff, and I'm just trying to be a better individual, and I'm working so hard, but man, and then our feelings connect with our behavior and our thoughts, and we get into this vicious thing. And we start to believe that we're trapped. Somebody has said this about, and here's one of the tools I think Satan will try to have you use to change your behavior, and then we'll move on to the third one. He'll try to get you to use your thoughts to change your behavior. And somebody has just said about that, it's like arm wrestling yourself. It's like, I'm going to have an arm wrestle with myself. I'm going to take my thoughts against my behavior and see on a given day which one will win. Well, on some days you win, and then that's false hope. On the other days you lose, and then that's despair. It's like, here I am again. And into that situation, Jesus says, I came to give you freedom, not that. So let's go to the third one. Third one, I'm just going to call this limitations. Probably better ways to say this. Limitations are, what I'm thinking about when I say this one, is if on the first thing we're trying to change something around us, on the third, or in the second one, we're trying to change the issue of behavior in our hearts. The third one, how do we deal with this thing of limitations at the end of the day? And I call limitations the thermostat of your soul, of your heart, of who you are. And when I say that, I just say this. Remember, you guys know the purpose of a thermostat in a house. When you're trying to heat a house, in the wintertime, the air will cool down, the thermostat triggers it, and it brings it up to a certain point, and then it shuts the heat off right at that point. Haven't we all been at a point where it feels like we make progress to a certain point, and then we don't? Like, how many of us have been to this point over and over again, and it's just like we can't push through any further. And we start to believe this about ourselves. It's only for a few that really get it. Like this stuff that we talk about, freedom and victory and you're more than a conqueror, and all of this stuff that makes up the lingo of Christianity really works on, oh, I could see, those people are getting it and those people. I get so far and then I'm stopped. You've been there? As much as I want to, as much as I want my life to be different and go further, somehow I get caught at a certain level. Limitations. Fourth one. There's 5, so there's going to be one more after this. Belief. What I want to think about then in this one is the difference between thoughts and beliefs. Because we probably, if I was to go around and ask you this question, what do you believe about God and what do you believe about yourself? I would guess in this group, you guys look like a fairly reasonably sounded group of people. You'd be accurate on your thoughts about God and reasonably accurate on your thoughts about yourself, right? But what is the difference between a thought and a belief? Now, as you think about that, if I tell you this, God is good, is that a thought in your heart or a belief? See, if it's a thought, it's lodged here, not here. And so in the moments when life gets tough and it feels like the deck's stacked against me, do I actually believe that he's good? And one of the deals we do early on in the class was, you say you believe this, but do you live as though that's true? Because if you say you believe it and don't live as though it's true, like if this idea of victory is just a thought in your head, what's going to help it move to the belief level? Remember this. Thoughts, here's how you know it's a thought. Thoughts, you can change information will change your thoughts. So you can say, I'm thinking this, and someone can bring you new or better information, and you switch your thoughts. Beliefs don't work that way. Beliefs are so core to who you are that it takes revelation, not information, but revelation to change your beliefs because they're lodged in your heart. So let's think about this in a real practical level. I've heard people say this about themselves. I'm ugly. You know where that came from? I can never be like you. It's right here. I'm a loser. That lady would lay in bed and tell herself over and over again, I'm worthless. I can't even get out of my bed and help my kids and my husband. It was not a thought. And you could tell that person over again in their head, but Jesus loves you. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure he does. But it was only a thought, not a belief. So now here's the rest of the story about this lady, and I want you to be thinking about what is it that you actually believe, because it's odd. In churches we have statements of belief. A lot of times they're basically little more than thoughts of a church group because they're not lodged here. And at the end of the day, a lot of times we don't believe it though that stuff's even true. So here's what happened to the lady. She's talking to my friend who's trying to help her, and he's he's pretty new at this kind of thing, and he wasn't sure what to say. So he had on his desk that he would hand out to people who came to him for help. He had this set of verses, and the set of verses were a combination of, this is who God is, this is who you are, and this is what's true about you. And after meeting with her a few times, he just took that piece of paper and he said, I want you to spend time reading through this. And then I want to see you in 2 weeks at 1 o'clock. I think it was actually 12 o'clock, because 1 o'clock was when she took her sleeping pill. But he said, before you leave today, I want you to just out loud read these verses. And she's sitting there, this woman who had been in bondage to all kinds of stuff. She's sitting there and she starts reading it, and he watched her face and he saw something start to change here. And she gets done and she stands up and she walks out with her piece of paper. 2 weeks go by, she misses her appointment. And so he gives her some time. He's thinking, well, she might be late and she might have got caught in traffic and all of the reasons it could have been. And finally he decides, I'm going to call her, and he dials her. It's now 1 o'clock, and he's like, and the phone rings and rings, and he's like, dang it. She probably already took her sleeping pill. And finally the phone, she picks up the phone and she's breathing hard. She's just, and she answers the phone, and he's like, you're supposed to be at my appointment? And she's like, oh yeah, about that. She said, yeah, I got busy with all kinds of other things. She said, in the last 2 weeks, I've been cleaning out my closets, and today I decided to clean out the garage. She said, I've been in bed for 11 years. Can you imagine what a wreck my house is? And she said, I've been cleaning my house. And he's like, you're doing what? He said, but you need to come see me. And she said, no, I heard from God. Here. It wasn't a thought anymore, it was a belief. People in levels of change, we must carefully examine what we think and what we believe. Because if we're going to change into his likeness, it will not be on the thought level. It'll be at the stuff when we hear from his heart, from his word, from his spoke. However it is that you hear from him, you hear the truth about him, you hear the truth about you. No, you're not a loser. And you hear the truth about what he wants for you. And the last one then is this. I want to give us this definition for identity. Think about identity as the blueprint in God's heart that he had for you when he was fashioning you. Do you understand? This is not this. If we carry this on a thought level, we're going to be forever stuck at a thermostat somewhere in our hearts. What shapes your identity? Let's start with that question. Our identity can be shaped by how good our kids are doing. Or maybe how good or terrible our parents are doing. Or what that person said about me. Or how I'm doing in this area of my life. It could be shaped by our behavior. We start to believe that because on a behavior level, I'm a good-for-nothing, worthless follower of Jesus. See, what is your identity? And where do you get it? Do you understand that God had a blueprint especially drawn for you when you come on the scene, because he carefully wanted you to make a difference, to receive, to contain his life, and to broadcast his life. He carefully fashioned you. Every piece of your personality, all of those parts mattered to him, and he made us all different because he is so big. We can, in our best stages, just represent one small piece of him, but together we can show the world who he is. That's your identity. Now, to wrap up the talk this morning, I just want to remind you of two things. I think if we're following religion, we always try to change from bottom up. You follow Jesus, he will always start at the top and work down. Because when you know who you are in him, it then shapes the beliefs you have about him and you have about yourself. And then the limitations that your heart is placing on your own life are gone. Now you want to be like him. It's not a, well, gosh, I somehow get the lug wrench out and I'm going to work like everything at it today. It's like, I'm his. Isn't that fantastic news? And then whatever's going on in your environment. That's why Paul could sit in prison and say, I'm free. Because circumstances never touched him because he knew who he was in Jesus. And he worked from the top down. I'm telling you, religion always works from the bottom up. And Satan will try to get all of us to work bottom up harder. Because we'll never get but so far with it. Now, so that is that piece. Think well about the direction in the whole desire to change and be like him. Or you're working top down. And now I'm going to do this, and some of you have seen this before. So play along with me. For those who haven't, I brought this guy. Does anybody remember these things? They were called Beanie Babies. For those of you who don't remember these are called Beanie Babies. And by the way, just so you know, there's not beans in here. Don't ask me how I know that. It's not beans. Man, when was this a craze? In like the late 90s? My question to you is, so this still has a tag. You don't ever take the tag. And here's the pressure we felt as parents. Like if all your kids' friends had them and your kids didn't, they were doomed to be with a therapist for years to try to work through the fact, I didn't get a Beanie Baby when all my friends had it. So anyhow, we still have these laying around the house, so I brought this along. Here's my question to you. And by the way, this one's name is, it even has a name. Remember that? Millennial. What a creative name for a purple whatever. Here's my question to you. What is this thing worth? What would you give me for it? I mean, that establishes worth. Dennis, what are you going to give me for this guy? Levi, you going to give me anything for it? No. Oh, there's got to be at least one. When this thing was manufactured, it cost the this thing had 25 cents of material in it, raw material when they were being made. That was the cost of it. It retailed, so to the manufacturer it was 25 cents. That's what it was worth. To the retailer, they retailed, and you might need to help me out. I'm thinking like $5.95 $7.95 to like $9.95. Is that a range kind of a thing? That's what the retailers establish as a value, as worth for this thing. There was a dad, I know of a dad, who his daughter was on her 6th birthday, wanted a particular kind of Beanie Baby and a particular color in that kind. He went on eBay and spent $1,000 for one of these. It's no joke. See, the question is not, what is this worth? The question is, who are you going to ask? What are you worth? Biologists tell you that the human body, and this is the raw material of a human body, and this is from like 10 years ago. Inflation put it up, so good news to you, you're worth a little more. 10 years ago, the raw material of your body was worth $1.39. So on the margins, you might be worth $3.39. You're not worth much. What does a politician say you're worth? You know how a politician will establish your worth? How much you can push his agenda and get votes for the politician. Let me just give you a heads up about Custer County. When they run in Denver for the governorship, they're not worried about us in here. It isn't a swing county. So to politicians, other than on a local level, you're not worth much. What about, let's go to the, how much would an economist say you're worth? Well, the economist is going to base your value based on what do you bring to the economy? Are you creating jobs? And are they good paying jobs? And from those jobs I look around here and I don't think there's much of that going on either. What about culture? What would culture say you're worth? Well, culture is going to base that some on what you drive, what you live in, your looks. Oh, man. Oh, buddy, I'm in trouble. See, the question is not, though, at the end of the day, what are you worth? The question is always going to be, who are you going to let speak into your heart? That answer. Because if the biologist said you're not worth much, if the politician says you're not worth much, if if culture says you're not worth much, if the economist says you're not worth much, what does this person say about you? I promise you, people, you establish identity in that, he'll change you. He'll change your beliefs. He'll change that thermostat that's been stuck on 70 forever. He'll change your behavior. He'll change how you see your environment and how you live in your environment. Because he said, your worth is so high. When everybody else said you're a worthless person, he said, it's beyond a number. And he wants to come into this, in this kingdom life. He so longs for you. The blueprint that he created for you was, I want you to live well in freedom. I want you to be forever free, not stuck on these weird levels of change. I want you to be forever free. That's what you were worth. And so as Zach comes, I want us to just take a couple moments and just sit in that truth. Because I tell you, we're so good at believing the lies about ourselves. Can we just sit in the truth of, I loved you so much, I would do that, to have you in my kingdom and to have you free. Can you just rest in that this morning and start to push back on all this garbage that maybe you're believing about yourself and circle back to, oh, I'm deeply loved and I belong to that. That's fantastic news, folks.